Breaking. FBI identifies the voice in Nolan Wells' viral audio. Who is the alleged culprit? The FBI has identified a voice, not a claim, not a theory, a real forensic identification, pulled from the background audio of a real emergency call. Made the day a 17-year-old boy went into the water and never came back up. Take a look at this for a moment. Nolan Wells disappeared on a boat trip with people he knew. Not strangers, people he knew. And somewhere in the chaos of that afternoon, someone made an emergency call. That call was recorded. And buried in the background of that recording is a voice that the FBI has now formally analyzed. Okay, stay with me. Because before we get to what the FBI found, we need to establish what the recording actually is. This is a CTOW emergency call. CTOW is a Marine Assistance Service. Think of it like roadside assistance but on open water. The call was made on the day Nolan disappeared. It is a confirmed, documented recording. Not leaked, not pulled from a private source. Reported on by NBC News, by TMZ, by Newsweek. All of them independently had access to the foreground conversation. All of them independently noted background noise and commotion during parts of that call. That background noise is where this case changes. For weeks after the call surfaced, people online started slowing it down, isolating frequencies, replaying sections at reduced speed. And a specific claim began spreading fast. 3 things, buried in the background. First, Nolan's name being called out. Second, someone asking if he is dead. Third, a direct instruction, naming a specific individual, telling that person to check someone's chest. Now here is where we have to be exact. Because the difference between a viral claim and a federal finding is everything in a case like this. Not one outlet that had direct access to that recording confirmed those 3 phrases. Not NBC, not TMZ, not Newsweek. Not one forensic audio expert publicly authenticated that interpretation. No law enforcement agency acknowledged it in any statement. So for weeks, that claim lived in one column only. Unconfirmed. Not proven false, not proven true. Unconfirmed. Until this week. The FBI initiated a voice identification process on the background audio of that CTOW call. And now, federal sources indicate an identification has been made. A voice in that background chaos has been matched to a specific individual. Someone present that day, someone on that boat. Now watch this. Voice identification at the federal forensic level is not a simple process. This is not someone pressing their ear to a speaker. FBI forensic audio analysts use spectrographic comparison. They isolate specific frequencies. They strip ambient noise, engine hum, wind distortion, water movement. What remains are vocal patterns, cadence, pitch range, resonance. These are compared against known voice samples from identified individuals. And when they match, that match is documented as forensic evidence. Not opinion, evidence. That is the single biggest shift in this entire investigation. Last week, a viral interpretation with no authentication behind it. This week, a federal forensic process that has produced a real result. And that result points to someone who publicly said very little about what happened on that boat. Someone who maintained a consistent public posture of calm and cooperation. Someone connected to a name already under scrutiny in the state of Mississippi. We are not going to name that individual here. Not yet. Because voice identification is not a charge. It is not an arrest. It is a piece of evidence that now sits inside a federal investigation. And that investigation is still moving. But here is what identification does mean. It means the voice claiming not to know what happened may have already been heard saying something very different. In real time. On tape. Before we get into that GPS data, hit subscribe right now. Turn on notifications. Because this case is the most actively developing true crime investigation in the country right now. And this channel is the only place breaking it down fact by fact, confirmed versus unconfirmed, sourced every single time. Not rumors, not screenshots. Verified developments. Subscribe. Notifications on. Then stay with me. Because the audio does not exist alone. Underneath it is a GPS record that no one on that boat has fully explained. And those two things together are not a coincidence. They are a timeline. Here is something that has no opinion, no agenda, no stake in the outcome, no reason to protect anyone. A GPS chart plotter is a machine. It logged exactly what happened that afternoon, position by position, timestamp by timestamp. And what it logged is one of the strongest, most legitimately unresolved questions in this entire case. Let's go through it exactly as confirmed. Nothing added. The boat was stationary at Horn Island until approximately 4:30 p.m. At 4:31 p.m. it started moving, not fast, between 0.06 and 0.42 knots. For context, that is walking pace, on open water, for 53 minutes. By 5:24 p.m. the boat had covered roughly 2.7 miles. Then the speed changed. Normal cruising speed, 35 knots. And by 5:44 p.m. it was docked at El Camino Railroad. That is the confirmed sequence. Source: GPS chart plotter data held under law enforcement authorization. Nobody on any side of this case has challenged its accuracy. Not the family, not the attorneys, not the investigators. Nobody. A boat moving at walking pace on open water for 53 minutes is confirmed, documented, and still unexplained. Now layer the audio on top of that. We established in Chapter 1 that a voice in that recording was captured in a moment of chaos. Someone with knowledge of what was happening on that boat in real time. Now place that voice inside this GPS window. A boat barely moving, for nearly an hour, on open water. That is not the picture of a sudden, quiet disappearance. That is the picture of a witnessed event unfolding slowly on a boat going nowhere fast. Now here is where the timeline gets more complicated. A newer and more detailed version of this GPS data is circulating, and it goes significantly further than what is already confirmed. According to this version, after docking at 5:44 p.m., the boat left again. At 5:52 p.m. it headed into Fort Bayou, returned at 6:06 p.m., left a second time at 6:36 p.m., moved southwest, then southeast, then north toward a different boat launch entirely, arriving there at 7:19 p.m. And then at 7:47 p.m. the boat was pulled from the water, trailered overland to a private residence in Biloxi. If that sequence holds, this is not one unexplained stop. It is 4 additional legs of movement, spanning nearly 2 more hours. All on the same day a teenager went missing, hours before anyone reported him missing at all. Now we have to be exact about what is confirmed and what is not. The first sequence, Horn Island to El Camino Railroad, cleared the verification bar. Checked. Confirmed. Sourced directly from law enforcement held data. This newer sequence has not cleared that same bar. Not yet. We are not saying it is wrong. We are saying it has not been verified the same way the first part was. And that distinction is not a technicality. The confirmed 53-minute crawl already stands as one of the most significant unresolved facts in this investigation. It does not need to borrow credibility from data that has not been authenticated yet. Now here is the one explanation that exists on public record. Warren Hudson stated that the boat made a stop at Fort Bayou to replace a boat plug that had been pulled to drain water from the stern. That is a real explanation. It is on record. It accounts for one leg of one trip. If the fuller timeline holds, the remaining stops have not been addressed by anyone. Not publicly. Not once. One explanation on record for one stop. Everything else still open, still documented, still unanswered. And now sit with this. The FBI's voice identification places a specific individual in a state of knowledge about Nolan's condition in real time. The GPS places the boat in a pattern of movement that has not been fully explained. Those two things are not separate stories. They are the same story told from 2 different sources, audio and GPS, both objective, both time-stamped, both pointing at the same window of time. Right here. Stop for 1 second. The FBI has a voice, the GPS has a route, and there is a sealed autopsy sitting in a file that a grand jury is about to open. If you want to be here the moment that file is unsealed, subscribe right now, because when that grand jury finishes with that report, This channel is going to break down every single finding, confirmed, disputed, unverified, sourced every single time. Not a summary, not a headline, a full breakdown, the same way we just did with this GPS data. Fact by fact, source by source. Subscribe, notifications on, because Chapter 3 is where the medical evidence meets everything we just built. And that is where the real weight of this case lands. 22 days. That is how long passed after Nolan Wells did not come home before a single official answer existed. No cause of death, no manner of death, not even an official date of death. Those are not paperwork delays. That is a mother being told nothing. 3 weeks, 0 answers. And that is where Dr. Roger Mitchell enters this case. Dr. Mitchell is a named, board-certified forensic pathologist. Not an anonymous tip, not a social media claim. Commissioned directly by the family to conduct an independent examination. His preliminary findings came back with 3 conclusions. Cause of death, undetermined. Manner of death, undetermined. Date of death, unknown. All 3, unresolved. Now here is the part that deserves to be said honestly. Decomposition materially limited how complete this examination could be. That is a real constraint. It is not spin, it is not an excuse. It is a documented scientific limitation that affected what could be determined. Some questions in this case may never be fully answerable. That is a genuine reality. But inside that same report, there is one specific finding that has not received nearly enough attention. Dr. Mitchell documented a focal area of discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. A named forensic pathologist, documenting something he physically observed during examination. That is not testimony. That is not a viral screenshot. That is not background noise someone slowed down online. That is a documented physical finding from a credentialed forensic examination. Now here is exactly where we draw the line. We are not going to conclude what Dr. Mitchell's own report does not conclude. His report says undetermined across every category. In the same document that includes this observation, that discoloration is not a ruled cause of death. It is not a ruled manner of death. It is a physical detail that raises a real question without closing it. This report does not overreach, and neither will we. Now here is the piece that changes the shape of everything. There are 2 autopsies in this case. Not 1, 2. The state medical examiner conducted their own independent examination on July 7th, 15 days before Dr. Mitchell's findings were made public. That report is complete. It exists, and it has not been released to anyone. Per the DA's own public statement, that report will not be released to the family, to the public, or to anyone outside a very specific circle until a grand jury reviews it first. Let that land for a second. A completed state autopsy. Already finished, sitting in a sealed file, while a mother waits. Now place that against everything already established. A federal voice identification on background audio from the day Nolan disappeared. A GPS record showing 53 confirmed minutes of unexplained movement at walking pace on open water. An independent forensic pathologist documenting a physical detail he cannot fully resolve. And a completed state autopsy that no one outside a small room is allowed to read. 2 examinations. 1 partial public answer that raises more questions than it closes. 1 complete answer sitting sealed behind a grand jury process. That gap between what has been found and what has been shared is not a footnote. It is the actual shape of what this family is living inside right now. And it does not stop there. A formal ethics petition has been filed against a sitting judge whose son was the last person publicly known to have been with Nolan Wells. An FBI threat investigation is actively running, targeting officials, witnesses, and Christine Wells herself. A governor made 2 distinctly different public statements about this case. Major outlets cannot even agree on his exact wording. Every door in this investigation has already been opened. Audio, GPS, medical findings, a sealed file, federal investigations, a judicial ethics review. Not one of them has closed. And then quietly, Without cameras, without a press conference, without an attorney at a podium, Christine Wells went to court. She filed to be named administrator of her son's estate, a standard legal requirement. The court system requires it of next of kin regardless of circumstances. It does not signal new evidence. It does not name a target. It is simply the legal mechanism by which a parent becomes formally recognized as the person responsible for their child's affairs after they are gone. But here is the reality sitting underneath that procedure. This woman spent 3 weeks in front of cameras, giving statements, answering questions, correcting herself publicly, fighting for access to a report she still cannot read. And then, without an audience, she went and filled out the paperwork required for a court to legally recognize that the boy in the file was her son, 6 days after she buried him. That is what this case actually is. Not just a viral audio clip, not just a GPS anomaly, not just a pathology report. A mother proving on paper what she already knows. While the one answer that might tell her how he died sits sealed in a file a grand jury has not opened yet. Here is exactly where this case stands. The FBI has an identified voice. The GPS has an unexplained route. A forensic pathologist has a documented physical finding he cannot fully resolve. A completed state autopsy is waiting behind a grand jury, and every single one of these threads is still live, still moving, still unresolved. When that grand jury opens that sealed file, this channel is going to be the first place that breaks it down. Line by line, finding by finding, confirmed, disputed, unverified, sourced every single time. That is why you subscribe right now. Not for more true crime videos, for this specific case. Because the answer Christine Wells has been waiting 3 weeks to hear is finally about to be written. And when it is, you need to already be here. Subscribe. Notifications on. This case is not over. Not even close.